The San Marino Grand Prix 1994. A sporting event became the focus of a global news story, and this small town in northern Italy was the setting for a series of events that stunned the world. 20 years on, I'm making the journey back to Imola, recounting the events of a weekend that shocked the sport I'd grown up with, devastated the team I was part of, and ultimately changed the course of my life. This is the untold story of the season that shook Formula One. The death of arguably the greatest driver the world has ever seen. He was the three-time world champion, Ayrton Senna. And I was his last teammate. I suppose I'd harboured hopes that it was going to be serious, but they'd sort him out and he'd be okay, maybe some recuperation. But so it was a bit of a shock to be told that he was already dead. I think you become aware of how frightening it is later, and how horrible it was. The whole weekend was horrific and upsetting, and really did then start to pose the question, crikey, if it was going to be like that every weekend, you can count me out. I haven't been to Imola at all, because there hasn't been any reason to, because since I stopped racing, so 99 was probably the last time. The meaning of the word Imola since 94 has always carried with it the memory of the tragic events of that weekend in 94. So it's been tainted, if you like, in some sense, which is a real shame, because it's a classic track, it's a classic venue, it's in Italy. The fans are excited to see you. Italy's one of the best places in the world to be a racing driver.
The most important thing to all of us is to keep the good moments and keep the happiness that we had together. I had a tremendous time. The records speak for themselves, the results, the championships, and I got respect from the people who I worked with so long. I have tremendous respect for them as well. I leave friends behind, and I think that's the best way to do it.
I think the thing that makes Ayrton unique is that he just showed no respect for the established stars in the sport, whether they were the other competitors, the teams, the tracks, the cars, or the authorities. He arrived and he did exactly what he wanted to do, and he pushed himself through limits that were places where most people had just given up.
Senna goes through into the lead. He's passed Alain Prost.
He extracted the maximum, and he became legendary for giving no quarter and for getting the most out of every lap, every corner, every fraction of a second.
Wheel-to-wheel stuff. Look at this, they're almost touching.
And it's happened immediately. This is amazing. Ayrton Senna achieves his ambition to win the Brazilian Grand Prix.
He's not about to be world champion this year. He will undoubtedly be world champion in the future if his career continues. Ayrton Senna, the new world champion.
Ayrton Senna wins in Australia to the delight of his fans.
I was on the podium in Australia in 1993, which was the last time that Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost were also on the same podium. I think Ayrton had suffered quite a long time in McLaren, split with his loyalty towards the team, but also his desire to win. And he saw his arch nemesis, Alain Prost, cleaning up in the Williams, and wanted and presumed that that was going to be the place to go. So he wanted to go to Williams because he wanted to win another championship and win more races, and ultimately come out ahead of Alain Prost.
I think it was pretty clear that Frank had invested a lot, the sponsors had invested a lot in getting Ayrton. So Ayrton was a 3-time world champion, and I'd only won 3 Grand Prix.
I think it's reasonable to assume that Williams thought, as did Ayrton, that things were going to progress as they had done in the previous seasons, with a lot of wins and world championships, more world championships. They were the team to go to.
This is where Grand Prix 1994 is go. Interlagos, a circuit to dream of. The ideal venue for the start of a new World Championship season.
In the start of 1994, there were new regulations that had brought back passive suspension after a year or so of active suspension. Benetton were a bit of a surprise, especially at that time they had the Ford engine, so it was not considered to be the best motor out there. So we clearly had been wrong-footed, if you like, by this change in regulations, and it seems like Benetton had got the upper hand there right from the start.
Schumacher is out ahead of Ayrton Senna.
He was chasing Michael, but basically I think the car was just really hard to drive, and I think eventually he just lost it on the last corner.
That is Senna. Senna. My goodness, Ayrton Senna frantically gesticulating, and that's blown the race for him if Michael Schumacher can just keep going.
Michael Schumacher won the race. I came second, and I was in contention for the championship.
How surprised were you by the pace of the Benetton here?
Come on, say something. I was not surprised so much. I'd seen how quick they were in testing, but I was surprised really to see how quickly both Ayrton and Michael went away at the start.
In Aida, Ayrton managed to get the car on pole position. It was still quite difficult to drive.
For me, it was a case of inching closer if I could, and keeping the gap to a manageable amount. But from time to time, Ayrton would put out a huge chunk, and using all his innate skill, which really would wake me up to the size of the challenge.
And it is go. Yellow flags waving in the background, and straight into the lead goes Schumacher. Olivier Panis has stopped, and a spinner there. That is Senna, and he's rammed by Larini.
He was squeezed out of the first corner, and he spent a bit of time down there listening to the Benetton as it went past, and concluded that there was what he regarded as unusual noises from the engine. And so I think there was some discussion from that point on as to whether the Ford Benetton had got some special tweak that was giving them an advantage. So from that point onwards, it was a matter of discussion.
The circuit itself is right in the middle of a town, of Imola. So when you come to race in Imola, it's always in the start of the year, so it's springtime and everything's blooming. It's just very, very lush and a beautiful time of year to be in Italy. The Tifosi come out, so it's their first chance to see the Ferraris after Brazil and Japan. We came here, and so you can imagine the excitement. And Gerhard had been going quite well as well in the Ferrari, so loads of anticipation. The place is packed with flags, yellow and red flags all over the place. So this part of the circuit's different slightly to what it was, but the hill's still there and the layout's pretty much as it was. And that is the start and finish line that always was.
I think we started the season thinking we were going to be the people to beat, and so this was a little bit of a surprise that Benetton were in the frame. But we knew that there was work to do and we were ready to do it. I'm pretty sure that we all went to Imola thinking, right, we're going to start winning now.
We have some problems, but I think we have a good car, and I think we have a good engine too. We just have to work on these problems at this moment, which the team is doing. And for that we have some modifications here at Imola, which we shall be trying the next 2 days, hoping to improve part of the difficulties we have found so far.
So it's Friday morning, everyone's just settling in, looking forward to a great weekend, and suddenly, bang, Rubens' car goes flying into the catch fencing. Everyone takes a sharp intake of breath and watched in horror. His car appeared to be going into the grandstand, but it threw Rubens back onto the track, and he came to rest upside down before the marshals tipped him over rather roughly, and we waited anxiously to see whether he was going to be all right. And that was just Friday morning.
And so that startled everyone, because I think any time you see a car launched like that, you're thinking, crikey, I didn't know they could do that. You know, that's a bit of a shocker. It wasn't like it's one of the fastest parts of the circuit, but it was the first of what was to be more very nasty shocks.
The San Marino Grand Prix 1994. A sporting event became the centre of a global news story. The first death in Formula One competition in 12 years. He was the Austrian Roland Ratzenberger. And I was his last teammate. One of the things I remember about Roland was his smile, and you know, he was so happy being on a Formula One grid. That's what he always wanted to do, and I'm sure there were times in his career he never felt that was going to happen. And you know, he went to Japan and back to Europe, and you know, and all of a sudden, bang, he's here in Formula One, and he deserved to be in Formula One. He was a very good driver.
Roland Ratzenberger makes his Grand Prix debut for the new Simtek team.
As a small team, we clicked really well because we were up against it, to be honest with you. We were trying to survive. We needed to work as a team, otherwise we weren't going to survive. Coming here, you know, we felt we had a fairly reliable car, which was important. It wasn't particularly fast, but at least it was reliable enough to us to learn about it and try and maximise what we had. I think I've been back once, but it was a while ago, and I can't even remember why I came back. It's kind of weird. This place kind of blanks out your memory a little bit, and I think there are things about that weekend in '94 you kind of want to forget, and there are things you just can't forget, you know. So it's a weird thing that you're battling with your head. Trying to remember things. Things are very clear in your mind, things you've just completely forgotten. So I'm hoping coming back here, actually, I can perhaps remember a little bit more. coming into Saturday, the mood was, well, obviously people were sort of still thinking about Ruben's accident because that was such a violent one. That, but then again, you know, everyone's focused on the day in hand, and qualifying is coming up. He hit the wall so violently up the end there at over 300 kilometres an hour. He had very little hope, to be honest with you. He hit it so hard, and he came down here to arrest. I knew it was Roland way back there because I saw some bits on the track, and obviously by the time I came round, I could see it was him. Looking in, you know, I really wanted to see, was he okay? You know, and what I saw, I realised he wasn't. For me, I just knew he was gone. I was in the pits, you know, sort of there with my overalls sort of a bit dazed, I guess, and someone, I think, confirmed that he'd gone. And it just, you know, I just wanted to get out of there. It was just an environment I just didn't want to be there anymore. I just needed to leave.
But I think of all the drivers who were affected, I mean, clearly he was your teammate. The whole team is shattered by what's happened. Oh. But Ayrton wanted to go and find out more. He went down to see Roland's car. He went onto the track. He was with Sid Watkins. He wanted to understand what had happened, and he started taking on that responsibility to find out as a racing driver what this was all about. And he was affected quite deeply. I think it's quite clear that he was affected very, very deeply by what had happened.
Well, you were quite close to that, so, you know, being his teammate, you would have seen it.
You know, I stayed in the garage. He jumped in a car, and then there was some sort of question as to whether or not he'd broken some regulation by going out onto the track in a, you know, such was the environment at the time that, you know, people were concerned about whether or not he'd broken some rule. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm not sure he cared.
I don't think he cared, no. And he quite rightly didn't care. No. He had a right to go and have a look. He was a senior driver, 3 times world champion, and he wanted to go and see if anything could be done, or what needed to be done, or what needed to be understood about. And this is on top of Ruben's accident the previous day, and now we have a fatality. Yeah.
Decision to race, I don't regret. I made the decision after the warm-up because everyone was saying, well, what do you want to do? And I just didn't know. You know, I just hadn't been in, like I said, I hadn't been in the situation before. I just didn't know what to do. So I decided to do the warm-up just to see how I felt, what the situation was. If I didn't feel right, I would have just stopped. And as I came into the pits, I just noticed this change in the team. Only slight, but it was this dark, heavy cloud that was completely surrounded everybody in the team. Just slightly lifted, and the only thing that came to my mind was I've got to race for the team. We've got to keep this going, keep our minds focused. You know, we're in a very different situation compared to, say, yourself, because you're gunning for a world championship. We're trying to survive, you know what I mean? So the pressures were very different. And so to get in the car and keep going was not a selfish thing. It was nothing to do with me. It was actually more to do with the team and help change things.
It might seem to be almost reckless to be thrilling yourself, you know, at the cost of potentially of losing your life or someone losing their life. Is that justifiable? I don't think that is justifiable. But I think it's, if you put it in that simple term, it's missing something. There's something more to it than just taking a risk. As always, before the race gets underway on Sunday, there's a driver's briefing. But I don't think anybody was in. There was no question that they weren't going to race. It was a pretty standard briefing. Obviously, they had to refer to the accident. I think there was a somber mood, but it wasn't anything remarkable other than there was concern voiced about the pace of the safety car. It was questioned as to whether or not the safety car was capable of travelling at a fast enough pace to keep up tyre pressures and temperatures. I know for certain that Ayrton wanted to raise that question.
I'm on the grid, 4th place for the San Marino Grand Prix. My teammate Ayrton is up there on pole position. It was an important race for Ayrton. He'd not won a race, and Michael Schumacher was legging off into the distance in the championship, and Ayrton, I think, knew he had to do something to bring things back towards him for the championship.
We are here in this 3rd round, European season, starting now, starting from 0. So basically our championship starts here, 14 races, not 16. And it's not a comfortable position to be in, but that's the reality, and the team is conscious about the challenge we have to make to recover the ground over Benetton, as well the technical development that we must be able to do.
Now, you've won here 3 times already. You really do need to make it 4.
I'd love to.
So, stand by for blast-off and for action from Imola. 61 laps of it. The green flag is showing. That means they're ready to go. Bruncher Rider can press the button. Now! And Senna boils away. Schumacher 2nd, Berger 3rd, Damon Hill, and that's a Lotus. They'll have to stop the race, I'm sure, because there's debris on the circuit.
Pedro Lamy went into the back of JJ Leto's car, which meant that they didn't restart the race, they brought out the safety car. You're just simply going at the pace of the safety car and trying to avoid going through the debris, which is almost impossible because the whole of the start-finish line was littered in bits of car, and just trying to keep up tyre temperatures. But these tyres are made for such extreme loads that you really can't regenerate much heat just behind a safety car going around for a few laps.
And you hear the engine revs rise as Senna, followed by Schumacher. There is Berger. We're on lap 6 now, and the San Marino Grand Prix is go again, and as before, Schumacher is the chief rival to Ayrton Senna, who comes down to the Ravazza. There's Berger 3rd, Damon Hill is 4th, Frentzen in the Black Sauber is 5th, Mika Häkkinen 6th, Larini 7th, and Carl Wendlinger in the 2nd Black Sauber is in 8th position. Senna, my goodness, I just saw him plunge off to the right.
So here I am on the exit of Tamburello. This is the new Tamburello. It was changed after '94, but it used to come in a very wide, sweeping arc. Very, very exciting. You'd exit at the corner at about 190 miles an hour, but on the race weekend, I came round behind Gerhard to be confronted with Ayrton's accident and lots of debris. In fact, I seem to remember something flying over the top of my head as I came past the scene. And I just thought to myself, oh, God, not again. This is like turning out to be the worst weekend. But, I mean, I had no inkling that it would be a fatal accident.
When we were brought back to the grid, this time we had to stop, and so we sat on the grid for quite a while, and then there was a lot of, you know, you can tell because there's people walking around looking a bit glum and concerned, and then I was told by Anne Bradshaw, who was the Williams PR woman, and she just told me that, you know, that you should know that it's serious, and you know, I took that to mean this is a life-threatening accident. At that time, the team wanted to know what had happened, and they were very concerned to learn as much as they could. I think it was very difficult to get data from the car, so they communicated with me, because if I was going to restart, they wanted to make sure that my car was okay. So we did just some checks, and I think they concluded that they hadn't got anything that indicated there was anything wrong with the car. Part of you is thinking, I've agreed to race. That's what I'm being paid to do. I want to race. I always knew, as a driver, I knew there were risks. I know there's risk. Ayrton knew there was risk. Roland knew there was risk. We'd had one fatality the day before. Now I'm told there's something serious happened. Why don't you just get out of the car and walk away? You know? For some reason, that thought does not lodge in your head for any more than a fraction of a second, if it ever does at all. And in some sense, it was just a kind of increased determination not to let bad things that happen in life put you off doing what you really want to do. At the time, we just wanted to get the show done and go home. Everyone was devastated. Everyone was in total shock and horrified, and I think very, very concerned that it was something to do with the car. It was quite clear that was a shock horror weekend from hell that we could not countenance going through ever again. I definitely think in Ayrton's case that he totally put his faith in God, and whatever would be God's will, and he just got on with his job. It was huge coverage and massive pressure on Formula One and the whole experience, and then we had, on top of that, we had Ayrton's funeral as well, which was absolutely, and maybe at a moment like that, the emotion comes out. I was encouraged to go by Jackie Stewart, and I spoke to Jackie about it on the phone, and I said I didn't want to go, and he said, you must go, you've got to go, because you'll always regret it if you don't go. The last funeral I'd been to like that was my dad's, so I think it was kind of muddled up with that a little bit. It was one of the most stunning exhibitions of emotion for an individual I've ever seen or witnessed. I mean, the whole of Sao Paulo seemed to have turned out. I don't think any of us had any idea how important Ayrton Senna had been to Brazil.
Formula One is in mourning. After the shock and trauma of Imola, it was hoping for a happier time at Monaco, but sadly it wasn't to be.
It was horrible. It was just horrible. I mean, the motorhome had gone straight from Imola, I think. They just parked up in Monaco. And Ayrton's T-shirt was still hanging up in the change room. You know, so it was, we had not had time to really even readjust to his loss. It was like, you know, we were expecting him to come and join the team again or something still. So Just one car at Monaco after all that wasn't very much fun, especially as we had another near fatal accident with Carl Wendlinger, and everyone was starting to feel a bit jumpy, I think. In the space of 2 weekends, that's 4 serious accidents. That's what's the odds?
Drivers' meeting of today, we agreed to form the Grand Prix Driver Association. After a 4-hour meeting, we discussed that we have to take immediate action to look at the next 3 Grand Prix circuits together with the FAA for possible improvements.
The GPDA's reconstitution at Monaco signalled the beginning of the movement towards making the cars safer for the future, and it may have even inspired the FIA to focus a lot on what could be done, because the drivers clearly were organising themselves into a body to express their views.
Oh, you're right. We had a very constructive meeting, and hopefully we can contribute to as the statement said, hopefully we can contribute to safety in Formula 1.
How can they reduce the speed?
If none of those accidents happened, this track would never have changed so quickly, and other tracks would never have changed so quickly.
But you had Piquet going off at Tamburello. He flew into the wall in unabated pace, and he survived. You had Berger's accident,
crash, yeah.
Turned over, caught fire. You know, so I think there was already concerns about corners like that. Gerhard tells a story of how he went up to that corner with Ayrton, I think, and they were looking at what could be done to make it safer, and they looked over the wall and they saw there was a river, so they knew there's no way they could move the barrier back. Yeah. And the ultimate solution afterwards was to stick in chicanes and lose Tamburello forever.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm conflicted. Because I can remember hammering around that corner and just thinking, this is fantastic. And going into Tosa at 200 miles an hour and hauling on the brakes.
Yeah, I mean, that big, long left-hand corner wasn't really a corner as such.
No,
you know, you could kind of go wherever you wanted.
It was like Curva Grande in Monza.
But coming into the hairpin, you know, that was fun. That was fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, the cars had so much downforce, and you could haul on the brakes.
Well, yours
really
did.
Mine did.
Yeah. Mine not so much.
Horsepower and brakes.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that was all good fun. And of course, but there's a price to pay for that, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's tough for Damon Hill. Just as his father, Graham, had to lift Lotus in 1968 after the death of the great Jim Clark, so Damon now has to replace the great Ayrton Senna.
It was an inspiration, if you can call it that my dad kept it together and pulled the team together after the loss of Jim Clark in Lotus. And I thought, well, come on, son, you know, somebody needs to pull this one up by the bootstraps, because we can't just let this, you know, defeat us. And so, yeah, I definitely wanted to lift people's spirits if I could with results.
This is it. He is now dropping down the final descent to the final corner of the Spanish Grand Prix, which Damon Hill wins.
Patrick and Frank gave me a fantastic opportunity, an opportunity of a lifetime to actually be a test driver, let alone be a Grand Prix driver. So they had put their faith in me. I don't think they'd ever seen me as a candidate, potential #1 candidate. And by this tragic default, I was in contention for the championship.
The relief and release for you must be enormous. You've lost your great team leader, and now you've got someone to help you in the team. Do you feel better about things in general?
I feel a lot better. I mean, it's a 10-ton weight off my shoulders, and it's been very difficult realising how much the team has been through, how much the team wants to win, how close we came with Ayrton, and Ayrton never scored a point, never finished a race for the team. And it's been a tragic start to the season, and I so much wanted to do what I could to at least inject some sort of pleasure back into what we're doing, and so this, you know, this win is important as much for the team as it is for Ayrton and his fans, to make everyone feel happy again.
We had the equipment that could do it. We needed to work on making this car work, and we slowly whittled away at things. But all the time, you know, it was always tinged with the kind of the poignancy, really, that, you know, we can carry on, but nothing's going to bring back Ayrton, and we're going to have that hanging over the season. Really, was just what happened.
On Adelaide's magnificent street circuit, the two men who have dominated the championship all year, Germany's Michael Schumacher and Britain's Damon Hill, start the Australian Grand Prix separated by only 1 point. And one of them must finish the day as the 1994 world champion.
Schumacher's off. Schumacher's lost time.
Yeah.
Hill goes by.
Oh, out goes Schumacher. The German is out of the Australian Grand Prix, and Damon Hill only has to keep going to be world champion of 1994, but can he keep going?
I'd given it my all, I think, that season, and we were all pretty exhausted emotionally at the end of it, and disappointed. You know, I think it was a tough season. We wanted to win it for Ayrton, really, and it wasn't to be.
For me, it was always clear that I'm not going to win the championship, and it's Ayrton who is going to win the championship, but he hasn't been there for the last races, and I'd like to take this championship and give it to him, because he is the driver who should have earned it. He had the best car, he was the best driver.
It was great to be in a team with Ayrton. I got an opportunity to be close to him for a while and see him work, and I just thought he was a very sensitive person.
It was kind of interesting to see his character, really, from being in the race car to someone who was quite ruthless.
Yes.
Put his helmet off.
Yeah.
And he cared a lot for people, animals, life in general. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was a real contrast between the two.
Massive contrast. Yeah. Difficult to equate the two personalities, the racing driver, ruthless racing driver who'd give you no quarter whatsoever. Yeah. I think that's what probably helps to sort of understand him a bit, is because I think he probably felt that, he must have felt that himself, that he didn't want to be a ruthless person, but in order to win, you had to be.
Yeah.
Going back to the circuit 20 years later, I think so much time has passed. I think a lot of the emotions have diluted, but that's not to say that that we've lost any kind of feeling for what happened. It was a tremendously difficult experience to go through.
Brazilians were not happy because he looked sad, and they like to remember him full of life. He was a contemplative figure, so I suppose it is probably quite true to see him like that, but you know, I think he went out in '94. I think he went out to win. I don't think he went out to for anything else.
Just wanted to come down here and just show some respect and say, you know, I haven't forgotten. It's strange because I know I've tried to block a lot of the emotions and feelings that kind of went on there. But, you know, just thinking about it, being here in this very spot definitely starts, you know, all those things start coming back again, and you just feel heavy, quite somber, sad. Yeah, it was, you know, the whole weekend was really bad, but for us, you know, we lost a teammate, we lost a pal, you know, and Formula One paddock lost two great drivers. You know, we never saw how great Roland could be, but, you know, he got there, he got to his dream, and he was happy. You know, if anything, he died happy, you know, because he was in a Grand Prix car.
There's been a lot of conjecture, a lot of speculation about the causes of Ayrton's accident. A lot of that speculation is centred on the integrity of the car, but I'm convinced that Ayrton was completely happy with the car, that he was going to be racing the following day, and I know this because he spoke to Georgie, my wife. She was with him actually on race day, and he was having a conversation, and he reassured her. He said that, you know, Damon will be okay because the Williams is a good car, and that certainly was my view of Williams, and I still to this day do not believe that the accident was caused by anything to do with the integrity of the Williams car.
I suppose the story should have been this, which was that in '94 I would have been able to see how I could have compared to one of the greatest drivers that ever sat in a Formula One car, and measured myself, and that would have been a challenge which I would have relished and would have learned a hell of a lot from. So to have not had that opportunity was a great loss. The difficult thing to acknowledge is that because I didn't get that chance, I was handed an opportunity to be in contention for the World Championship. So I gained an awful lot from Ayrton's death, and it put me in the limelight. It put me in the position of taking the challenge to Michael. It went on to become one of the most contentious and highly debated sporting seasons in Formula One history, and I have to acknowledge that I benefited enormously from that season. But it was all really because of the loss of Ayrton, so there's a very uncomfortable feeling about any satisfaction or any kind of claim that I might make on the 1994 season. I sincerely believe that if he had lived, it would have been very much about Ayrton Senna and not about me and Michael Schumacher.